Hello, the world. This is They Will Kill, a true crime podcast. I'm Zadiac.
And I am Courtney-ic.
We are doing a Western theme if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah, we didn't mean to coordinate, but I've got some tassels. Sadie's got some buffalo check.
Yeah.
Come on over, dudes. It's like, what do they call?
Murder rodeo.
Ranch hands. Yes, come on over to the murder rodeo. This one is a Canadian murder rodeo. I think this is a very famous bunkaroo from Canada. Tonight, I'm talking about the horrendous crimes of Colonel Russell Williams.
Oh, Colonel.
Yeah.
Extra gruesome.
Yes, and trigger warning, you guys, for sexual assault. This guy is not a cool guy. So between 2008 and 2009, residents of Orleans, Ontario, and Canada started reporting break-ins around their community, like the one that occurred in January when a family returned home from vacation. They were unpacking from their trip when their teenage daughter noticed that all of her underwear were missing from her dresser.
All of her underwear?
Yeah, just open nothing. Her parents initially laughed it off, thinking she'd misplaced it in the laundry room or under her bed, but after a thorough search, not one of her undergarments were anywhere to be found.
No.
Not only
I'm sorry, you don't misplace all of your underwear.
No. Nope. You're like, oh, I lost 8 underwears. I don't know how many underwears a teenage girl can lose, but not 100% of them. Not only that, she discovered that some of her dresses, shoes, bathing suits, and photos of her were also missing from the family album.
No.
Yeah, somebody went through the family album and plucked her out of it.
No.
Yep.
I feel like I've heard or know about this case. Was it a big deal?
Yes, very big deal. I think this is one of the most famous Canadian stories. I have not heard a ton about it, but I think it's been very well covered in Canada. I will say too, I did a pretty thorough job, but if you want a deep dive, Canadian true crime and dark poutine both have 2-parters on this. So if you want all the juicy details, head over there.
Maybe that's where, I bet you that. I do listen. I have listened to Canadian true crime. I bet that's where I've heard it. Okay.
Yep.
Yes. Tell me again.
So.
I don't remember anything.
Yeah. Allow me to enlighten you on these delightful details. So their daughter was so terrified by the intrusion that she refused to sleep in her own bed for 3 months after the fact, and her family kept a constant eye on her, worried that she could be the target of an even worse intrusion.
Yes.
Yeah, that's, I can't, poor dear. I cannot imagine.
How old was she?
Just a teen. I don't know exactly how old, but young. Too fucking young to have some creep coming in, stealing all your underwear and plucking you out of the family album. Like, that is so targeted. That's so specific. That's such a threat.
Taking your time. Yeah. Not in a hurry.
Nope. Orleans is described as a friendly, quiet suburb, so is considered very safe under normal circumstances. But between 2008 and 2009, there were 35 total break-ins and attempted break-ins reported throughout the community. All of the break-ins were similar to the one I described before, and women and girls were coming home to find their underwear missing, and there were hundreds of items reported stolen in total.
Where is he keeping all this shit?
Bins. What are those tough skins? What are those things called?
Like the Tupperware bins?
Yeah, the blue ones with the little lids.
Yes.
That's what I'm imagining. I don't know where else you would.
Right.
Yeah. In a lot of cases, the break-ins were so seamless, it took a while for the homeowners to realize anything was missing.
Ooh, that just gave me a chill.
It's also so gaslighting. Just being like, wait, I definitely had underwear before, right? Like crazy. Yeah, that would...
Yeah, we once lost a bottle of Worcestershire sauce.
Yeah.
And it completely, like, we both knew we had it, Ryan and I.
Yeah.
It disappeared. I wonder if somebody stole it. That's the only thing they took from our house.
So specific. Well, and you know what's weird? We're not there yet, but this guy is from Worcestershire, England. So it's his calling card. I bet that
My God, what if he
this
came in and
motherfucker,
stole it?
yes, that's probably where he started. He ramped up stealing
Oh, no.
Worcestershire sauce. That's so
From
weird.
me.
Yep. So police called the break-ins, quote, very peculiar in nature, and warned residents to keep their eyes open for suspicious behavior. You can fucking shove your peculiar. It's not peculiar.
Yeah.
It's
No, it's
predatory
nightmare fuel.
and dangerous as hell. By 2009, the frequency of break-ins had increased, and little did the police in Orleans know, but these same type of break-ins were also happening with a similar frequency in a town called Tweed, which is around 2 hours away from Orleans. Then in the morning of September 17th, 2009, a young woman was asleep next to her 8-week-old baby and reported that around 1 a.m., a man broke into her home, sexually assaulted her, took photographs of her, and then left 2 hours later.
Oh, no.
Yep. The next night, someone broke into that same home unbeknownst to the woman who had been attacked the night before. The same person broke in again, but she didn't know it until later.
So he broke into the same place?
Yes. And then he did it a third time 1 week after that. Yep, but she didn't know.
Help me.
Seriously. At the end of September, someone broke into another home in Tweed twice over a couple of days, then a third time, but a woman was home alone during the third break-in. She said she was surprised by a male intruder who blindfolded her, tied her up, cut off her clothes, choked her, beat her, and sexually assaulted her. The attack lasted around 2.5 hours, and he also photographed her during and after the assaults. The woman said she asked him if he was going to kill her, and his response was, quote, no need for that. She said that his voice was familiar to her, but she couldn't pinpoint from where.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Police were fairly confident that both attacks had been carried out by the same man, and so they probably had a serial assaulter on their hands. One day, a man named Larry Jones, who lived in the neighborhood where the attacks occurred, came home to a SWAT team surrounding his house and learned that he was a suspect in the crimes.
Oh, no. That's like, there's
Yeah,
they're
ready
not
to
fucking around.
pop in a fucking Hot Pocket after a long day's work, and instead you're getting swatted. The woman who had been attacked second lived right down the street from Jones, and the one who said she'd recognized his voice, and she eventually guessed that it was Jones's voice that she'd heard. Police interrogated Jones for 3.5 hours, after which he consented to being fingerprinted, having his DNA tested, and taking a 3-hour polygraph test, taking a 3-hour polygraph test over several weeks, and was eventually ruled out as a suspect. That sentence is awkward. He did not take the 3-hour polygraph test over several weeks. He did all of those things. Basically, they drilled him for several weeks.
Okay, good.
And in the end,
that's a very long polygraph test.
Okay, we're just going to do 5 minutes at a time. This is a 3-hour test. We're going to break it up over several weeks. No, they just
They investigated him for several weeks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have you edit my set of stories from now on. By then, the damage had been done, though, and Jones said that he was still guilty in the eyes of many of his neighbors, and the run-in made his life a living hell for a while.
I cannot imagine.
No. There's some creeper creeping around in people's homes, raping people and stealing clothes, and they think it's you. Your neighbors think it's you. Just forget about it.
No, never gonna move past that one.
No, you're going to move out of your damn neighborhood is what you're going to do. So then in mid-November, a woman named Anne Marsan Cook arrived home and proceeded to get ready for her birthday party that was being hosted by a friend nearby. She went to her bedroom to change her clothes and noticed the drawers in her bedside tables were open and some personal belongings were missing, specifically her sexiest toys.
No.
Yep. Her neighbor came. I listened to a Canadian news story about this, and they were like, she referred to them as her dildos. It's like, this was all worth it to hear that guy have to say dildos. Our neighbor came to pick her up for the party, and she asked him if she should call the police, and he said no, thinking that they would just use the situation as a, quote, good laugh at their coffee break. He told her that she should spend the night at his house that night just in case, and they checked that all of the doors and windows were locked and then set out for the night.
That's smart.
Yes. Anne arrived home the next morning and headed upstairs to make a photocopy of something in her office before she went to work, and the neighbor was downstairs and heard her scream from upstairs. The neighbor rushed upstairs and found Anne stunned and staring at her computer screen. The computer was old and barely used, but someone had turned it on, disabled the screensaver, and typed, quote, go ahead, call the police. I want to show the judge your really big dildos.
No.
Yeah.
He was there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anne then checked her bedroom and saw that her underwear drawers were open and completely empty. She said, quote, that's when I lost it and started screaming. She was especially terrified, as my sister just called it, when she figured out that whoever had robbed her and left the message had probably been in the house when she'd stopped through to change her clothes for her party.
I'm so glad she went.
Dude.
To stay.
Had some plans and then stayed over at the neighbor's house because this guy lingers. He's not an any out kind of guy. Had she come home that night, there's a really good chance he would have been there waiting for her.
I'm so scared. I don't know if I can get through this episode.
Yeah, he's fucking terrifying. So the deadbolt to her kitchen door had been unlocked from the inside after she'd left for her party, which solidified her suspicions that the intruder had been hiding while she was there. Yeah.
It's like...
No, yeah, it's a horror movie.
Yes.
She had a suspicion that her break-in was related to the other cases that she'd been hearing about, but was located just outside of Tweed in a town called Belleville. So a different police department investigated her break-in. She and her neighbor asked them if they thought the crimes could be connected, and the officers they spoke to said they were not aware of the crimes in Tweed.
How is that possible?
Because the fucking dipshits in Tweed were like, no, these are peculiar. Or maybe that was Orleans. But, they're just not taking it seriously. They're like, oh, some randy teen is stealing panties. Who cares?
Right. How bad could that be?
Yep. Very bad. Listen, guys, if someone's stealing panties, you need to get, all fucking teams on deck and get this person, because that is such deviant behavior. So Anne said she went out of her way to alert all of the... And listen, if you want to wear women's undergarments and have them and buy them, purchase them from the store, 100% in support of that. I want to be very clear. But you cannot take them from someone else without their consent. No. Period. Especially when you break into their home.
Especially if you're going to stay in their home and be a total creep and do tarot. No. It's so beyond okay.
Yeah. So Anne said she went out of her way to alert all of the women in her area, as well as women who worked on the military base where she was employed, that someone had broken into her home and taken her personal items.
Good for her.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's went door to door, just was telling everybody.
Good.
Then on November 25th, 2009, 37-year-old Marie France Como, who worked as a military flight attendant on the nearby military base, was found dead inside of her home. Friends described her as an artist and bohemian, and someone who was, quote, in love with life in general. She was a very curious person who was determined to experience as much of the world as possible and eat all of the different kinds of food she could find. Her work as a flight attendant for the military allowed her to travel all over the world, and she was thrilled that she'd found a career that allowed that dream to come true for her. Marie had been asphyxiated and was originally thought to be a suicide, but was later reclassified as murder. Then on January 28th, 2010, 27-year-old Jessica Lloyd came home after spending the evening out with friends. She texted a friend, quote, night-night, then headed to bed. Jessica Lloyd was described as, quote, friendly, vivacious, witty and outgoing young woman. She was the type to become instant friends with strangers, as she was so open and funny and easy to love. Around 3 a.m., a man named Lyle Barker and his cousin were setting out on a delivery and driving down Highway 37. The passenger of the car said he's forever on the lookout for wildlife like wolves and was keeping an eye out for anything interesting as they drove. He said he happened to spot an SUV parked in a field a ways away from the highway as well as far from the nearest home. It struck him as odd, especially because it was deep winter in Canada and people were not known to take their vehicles off-road with the constant threat of snow and ice. He and the driver both said they felt, quote, shivers go down their spines, and they had an instinct that something was not right. Mm-hmm. They kept driving, but would later learn that what they spotted was a crucial piece of evidence in a crime they would later learn about.
Bummer.
I know. Later that day, Jessica's brother Andy got a call from their mother informing him that Jessica hadn't shown up for work, and she was wondering if he could check on her. He drove straight to Jessica's house, and there was no sign of her there. Bizarrely, everything Jessica normally took with her when she left the house had been left behind, including her purse and identification. Police launched a massive search for Jessica, but unfortunately, police in Jessica's community didn't initially tie her murder to the break-ins and sexual assaults in Tweed or Marie France Comeau's murder. So after Lyle Barker and his cousin, who I mentioned before, completed their delivery and returned home, they saw Jessica's face all over the local news and missing posters. They passed by her home on Highway 37 and saw that it was swarming with police and realized her house was the house next to the field where they'd spotted the suspicious SUV parked at 3 a.m. on the night she went missing.
That is so lucky.
So lucky that they went by right at the time when the cops were there. I think one guy's like, I love looking for wolves. Always look for wolves. Always. If I lived in Canada, I would be constantly looking for wolves too. Are you kidding?
100% wolves. Yes.
100%. They reached out to the police to report what they'd seen, and luckily there hadn't been any snow and the ground was frozen hard, so when they investigated the field, they found a set of preserved tire tracks exactly where Lloyd had seen the SUV parked.
Also so lucky.
So lucky. Thank you, Canadian winter. Police immediately blocked off the highway and checked every car that passed by, and exactly 1 week to the day after Jessica went missing, police stopped a man driving an SUV. I mean, I'm sure they stopped somebody before this, but this is a one SUV country.
They're too busy giving the polygraph test.
I guess, seriously. They checked his tires and determined that they were a match, and so put the man under surveillance after that.
Shit, yes.
The man's name was Colonel Russell Williams.
God, I'm good.
I know. Had that not happened, we would have had a Golden State Killer times 12 on our hands. No doubt about it.
No doubt about it.
Colonel David Russell Williams was born in Worcestershire, England, and then his family immigrated to Canada when he was a child. Williams' parents divorced when he was 6, and he had a normal childhood, was a paper boy, and learned to play piano. His family was transferred to South Korea when he was a teenager, so he spent his last 2 years of his high school in a boarding school where he became a prefect for his boarding house. He studied economics and political science in college and was well known for his pranks against his roommates and his ability to pick locked doors to hide in homes for hours to scare friends. Mm-hmm. Yep. Should have just stopped there, bud. Just get your thrills by scaring your friends.
Seriously.
But he couldn't. He joined the armed forces in 1987 and went on to become an extremely well-respected member of the Canadian military, who was on track to rise in the ranks as his military career progressed. He was transferred to Ottawa in 1994, where he served as a pilot who transported high-ranking officials, and when the Queen visited Canada in 2005, he could be seen in the news footage saluting her as she boarded her jet.
I bet the Crown is not pleased with that information.
It just cannot cut a break. Just constantly surrounded by pedophiles and sex offenders. So I cannot stress enough how popular and important he was to the military and the surrounding community. He was constantly being honored by the charities he did work for. He participated in the Olympic relay. He was always one of the people to greet foreign dignitaries, you name it. He was very, very hot shit, and there are endless videos about his successful military career, but I refuse to cover it because fuck that guy.
Seriously.
Fun fact, friends said he was obsessed with the movie Top Gun, and many of them thought he was trying to live it out for real in real life. It came up a couple of times.
I mean, why does it not surprise me?
Yeah.
This, like,
Yeah.
dickhead is Tom Cruise.
Totally. And he's like a good looking guy. I mean, he's, you know, like the picture of an American hero for real. And
Canadian hero.
thank you. But he is also the picture of an American hero for our American listeners. So in 2009, he was appointed commander of Canada's biggest Air Force base in Ontario. He went through a bad breakup when he was 20, and his best friend, he said he doesn't think he had another girlfriend until he was around 30. Eventually...
God, that guy, yeah, no, he sounds like he's just full of himself. He got his heart broken, and he was like, oh, I'm going to go...
kill all women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Eventually, he married a woman named Mary Elizabeth. They purchased 2 homes together, and Williams spent his free time golfing, fishing, and practicing photography.
Like, he had a perfect life.
Perfect life, Sadie. Like, he could not have been more well-respected. He was described as very calm, logical, very rational, and very capable when it came to motivating his subordinates. He was the picture of an enviable military man with a 23-year career and an honorable past.
It's so awful.
Yeah. So on Sunday, February 7th, Russell Williams was at his home in Ottawa, and the police called to ask if he'd come down to the station for questioning. Williams thought they were going to ask about his neighbor, who turned out to be the man who police initially suspected of the rapes, Larry Jones. They were next door neighbors. Yep. So he happily headed in to oblige them.
Good.
So when the woman he attacked said, I recognize his voice, like she narrowed it down to somebody who lives in the neighborhood, but just picked the wrong neighbor at first. So when he got to the station, he was surprised to learn that police had found a set of tire tracks in the field next to Jessica Lloyd's house that were a perfect match to the tires on his SUV. Police interrogated Williams for over 9 hours, during which time he slowly admitted to all of the attacks and break-ins that had occurred around his homes in Ottawa and Tweed, and then admitted to having killed Jessica and told them where they could find her body.
Wow. I'm surprised that happened.
You can watch his confession. There's like 2.5 hours of it on YouTube, and he looks relieved. Like he looks sort of, he's very calm. He really is. It's like he's not smug. You know, he looks ashamed. But he kind of seems like he's relieved, and he's extremely cooperative. Like he's just walking them through point by point, and you can tell he's sort of softening the crimes and stuff a little bit, for obvious reasons, but yeah, he's just very helpful. He's like, you can go to my house, and if you go to the closet to the right of the blah blah blah, you'll find this, and I deleted the photos of Jessica, but I'm sure you can retrieve them, and they're on these 2 devices. I mean, it's yeah. So Williams said that he saw Jessica in her house on her treadmill on a Wednesday night. He said he followed up and she wasn't there on Thursday, so he broke in and looked around her home and then left. He said he returned to her home and broke in through the back patio door while she was sleeping a couple of nights later. He then woke her up, hit her once, and sexually assaulted her. He then drove her alive to Tweed, where they spent the day in his home.
No.
He said while in his house, at the end of the second day, he hit her on the back of the head with a flashlight, which rendered her unconscious, and so he strangled her to death. He said he'd only meant to knock her out. I mean, he meant to kill her, but with a flashlight, but he hit her so hard he caused her to bleed quite a bit. So he told police there would be blood evidence that he'd cleaned up in his living room. He then disposed of her body in the woods
Like where he still lives with his wife.
Yeah. Yep. That was chilling. It was in his confession. I didn't read anything about it, but the fact that he took her alive back to his home for a day. And then it was like, time's up. And so interestingly, Larry Jones, his neighbor, said that Williams was generally pretty stoic and aloof. But one day Jones was heading out to go partridge hunting when Williams approached him and like really enthusiastically started chatting him up, suddenly very interested in where Jones liked to hunt. Jones told him where he would go, specifically where he would go, and that's exactly where Williams dumped Jessica's body.
No.
Frame job alert. Yep.
Wow, he was just so excited when the SWAT team showed up at Jones's house.
Oh, can you imagine? He was
No.
like, bingo, bango, cover job.
Cover job activated.
So Williams said that Marie France Como left a window open in the basement of her house, and so he entered her home while she was away. He later returned when she was home and heard her on her phone in her bedroom. He said she actually discovered him in her basement because her cat had found Williams down there and wouldn't come upstairs when she called. Everyone get away, get rid of your cats, get rid of your dogs. She turned the lights on in the basement, so spotted Williams in the corner, and he used the same flashlight he later hit Jessica with and subdued her. He then tied her up, brought her upstairs, and later suffocated her with tape, which he removed and threw away.
That's just...
Yeah. Duct tape.
I just can't handle it.
His face had been disguised when he'd broken in, so he simply could have subdued her and left if he'd wanted to.
He didn't want to.
Nope. He was ramped up. He was ready to kill. So when the attack started in 2009 and the police started interviewing people in the neighborhoods where they were occurring, they didn't initially interview Williams when his neighbor informed them, Larry Jones actually informed them, that he was a high-ranking officer in the military.
Larry, you're not helping yourself.
Buddy. No.
I'm so glad I didn't get accused of this.
No, and he's like an older man. I would say he's probably 15, 20 years older than Williams, you know. His daughter, like they actually... she came home to find Williams in their house at one point too, and he ran away. Yes.
No.
But the police, they were like, "Who lives there?" And he was like, "Oh, that's Colonel Williams." And they're like, "Oh, well, clearly we don't need to talk to him." So they skipped over his house completely. Yep.
That's not the first time we've had a story like that. You
Nope.
gotta check the police officers, the lieutenants.
Yes.
All of
Even
them.
if you don't think they're a suspect, you still want to know what he's seen.
Seriously.
Like, just do a good job. Ugh. Williams was living in the family cottage in Trenton during the week, which was 2 hours away from where he lived with his wife. So he was free to do pretty much anything he wanted to do while he was there. So he had a cottage. He lived with his wife, and then he lived in the cottage during the week because it was close to the military base where he worked. So when he was there, he was like really free to do whatever he wanted. But that's why the break-ins were occurring in two places. So Williams told police that they could find his collection of keepsakes from his crimes, so they searched his home in Ottawa and found box after box of women's apparel that Williams had collected during his break-ins and attacks.
I can't imagine how much it was.
And like, how did you keep it from your wife, bro? Or did you? Or did she just think like, well, those are his things. It's just like nice things, so I'm just going to leave it alone. I don't know. They also found a notebook of, quote, painstakingly cataloged photos of some of the women he'd targeted wearing the clothes that he'd stolen and when and where he'd stolen them.
Man. What
So-
a creep.
Yeah. So I'm assuming some of these clothes were just clothes, you know, that he took pictures of them wearing in the world and then went in and stole them from them.
I don't like it.
Nope. There were also photographs of Williams wearing some of the clothes and undergarments he'd stolen over the years. So Williams was charged with breaking and entering, forcible confinement, and the sexual assault of two other women in connection with two separate home invasions, as well as the murders of Jessica Lloyd and Corporal Marie France Como. Williams pleaded guilty to all charges on October 28, 2010, and he admitted to other crimes at trial, including the attack on the mother who was sleeping next to her baby, and the fact that he had and the fact that he also had pedophilic tendencies and admitted to stealing the garments of girls as young as 9.
No.
Yep. He made, quote, 82 fetish-related home invasions and attempted break-ins between September 2007 and November 2009.
That is so many.
That's so many. 85 in 2 years. That is a full-time fucking job.
Right.
He often left notes or messages behind after he broke in, like the one I mentioned before, and he also admitted that he left the message, quote, merci, on the computer of a 12-year-old girl. Mm-mm. He also admitted to frequently pleasuring himself on his victims' beds.
No.
In the end, Williams was sentenced to 2 concurrent life sentences with the possibility of parole after 25 years because he lives in Canada.
Yeah.
And that is basically the fucking story of Russell Williams.
I don't like that story.
The monster of Canada.
No, dude.
No, dude. And like the only theory, he didn't, as far as I can tell, as forthcoming as he was about his crimes, I can't tell I couldn't see if he said why he'd done it. And the only theory I found was that he was on prednisone. So maybe he was all jacked up on anti-inflammatory steroids,
Yeah,
which
maybe.
my wife has been on a low dose of prednisone for a while now.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, she's not been breaking into homes and
Might be
taking
time
people's skivvies.
Might be time to check the boxes in the attic.
I was like, why are there so many tough skins? What are these called? Tough,
Something like that.
tough,
Tough
whatever.
Containers.
Yeah, we've got like 25, 30 of them stacked up in our entryway, but just been walking around them.
And nice end tables. Speaking of walking around, there's a dog out here just walking around.
Do you need to have it?
No. I might need to go help it, though, depending on if he's still out there.
Okay, keep an eye on it.
He's just having a good time. It sounds like an impulse. Obviously, it's an impulse thing, but just impulses he cannot control.
I think so too. Yep.
Just has somewhere along the line got this in his brain, liked to hide, liked to break in.
Yep.
It escalated. He got the control of being a high-ranking official, couldn't help himself.
Yeah.
Like if he's killing and raping women, has interest in young girl, it's just like all over the board.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really had the feeling of like Ed Kemper, where he was sort of like, I'm so glad that you are going to restrict me from continuing to do this. Mm-hmm. Also seeing his like nice, handsome dad face, kind face, and imagining it in the other form is absolutely fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
Like to imagine that switch. Yeah. Because I mean, even watching it, I'm like, if I were the investigator, I would just be like feeling sorry for him, because he just seems like a nice, normal fucking guy. Completely normal. Not even like creepy BTK glasses, just like a guy I would very happily let into my home and would never, his best friend, who remained his best friend, for this entire time, he's like, to this day, I cannot reconcile. He's like, it's just the absolute craziest thing that's ever happened to me. He said it was just the swiftest kick to the gut.
I can't imagine.
No. And honestly, I think if there hadn't been photos of him wearing the clothes,
Right.
I think that he could have potentially gotten away with it. Even with a confession, even with everything else,
Mm-hmm.
like had he wanted to, he probably could have gotten away with it because he was so beloved and so trusted. Ugh.
Yeah, I'm like,
Trust
as
no
you're talking,
one.
I know, I was picturing all of like the really handsome, sweet, trustworthy seeming people I know in my life, and be like, well, can't trust you, can't
Yes.
can't trust anybody with anything.
I have those moments where I'm like, I definitely know people who have hurt people very badly and potentially have killed people. And when just stop and think about it, guys, statistically, you have met a murderer. Ooh. No. Not just a manslaughterer. What the fuck? So, There you go. Good job, Canada. You really created a good one there.
Good story, Court.
Yeah.
Thanks for the nightmare fuel.
Yeah. Does anybody have any insight? Does anybody who's Canadian or who, I mean, I know that people probably have heard the hell out of the story from Canada and elsewhere. Does anybody know why? Did he confess any more information that you've seen?
Yeah, tell us.
Just please tell us. Otherwise, fuck that guy. And also fuck that guy.
Yes, both. Both things are true.
Yes. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.